Gracious God, as we gather together today, we are thankful for the blessings of being together and working together in community. We ask for your guidance as we plan for the future of our faith community. Help us listen attentively to each other, to work for justice, and to have faith that all will be well. Amen. So I think Paul and John and maybe somebody else have some copies of the agenda, maybe the Constitution, and some brand new brochures about our church that you might want to see. So if you need something, raise your hand, wave your hand high, and they'll get to you what you need. So first of all, I'd like to give a welcome to any of our new members that are here for the first time in our annual meeting, and I'm really happy you decided to stay. You can see the list of new members on page 16, so I'm not going to read through them all, but you can take a look at that. Then you can also see the agenda on page 3 or on the separate page if you just have that one. And I would like to ask, could I please have a motion to approve the agenda of our meeting? So moved, a whole bunch of them. Marv? Okay. Second? Okay. Marv, and then who wanted to second? Everybody did. Okay, Phil Winkle. And is there any discussion about the agenda, or any additions, anything else we need to put on there? Okay, if not, could I have a show of hands to approve the agenda? Any opposed? Okay, great. So with that, we'll go on with the agenda. The approval of minutes from last year's annual meeting, which was February 4th, 2004, were submitted and are in the annual report from Jim McNamara. And I would like to ask for a motion to approve those minutes from last year, please. Sue Dixon, Phil Winkle, great. Any discussion on that, additions or corrections to the minutes? Jean?
Yes, I have 2 questions.
Okay.
On the back second page, it says open time questions and comments, and there was a comment about cleaning up the room after people had used it. Has that worked? How is that working?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And then the other question was, there's a question about leaving the church unlocked overnight, and how is that working?
Mm-hmm. I guess I would ask for any input. You know, as from my standpoint, I think the cleaning up the rooms has gone pretty well. I haven't heard complaints about that. As well as the locking the church overnight, I think I can recall maybe one instance during the year where it was left unlocked. So I think it's going pretty well. Does anybody else have any different comments or same comments on that? Going well? Julia says it's going well.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Thanks for the question. Yes?
Do we have a quorum for our meeting?
Yes. Do we have a quorum for our meeting, clerk?
I believe the quorum is 10% of our membership.
So we need 48 people, and we have more than that. So I believe we do.
40 and a half people.
Okay, 40 and a half people. Oh, and there's 5 online. Okay, great. Good, thanks for reminding me of that, Phil. All right. So anything else about the minutes from last year? If not, can I have a show of hands to approve those minutes, please? Okay, any opposed? Okay. Then let's move on to a word of gratitude for the work of the ministries and the mission teams, the leadership team, and our wonderful ORUCC staff. Not just the pastors, but the full staff that you see listed on the front of your bulletin every week. One of the best things about ORUCC is that we are a community, I think. This is my opinion, but you can disagree if you want, because that's what we do here. We're a community of faith. We have many people contributing. Probably anybody you ask in this room contributes to a mission team, to a ministry, to a project, and I really, really appreciate that. I'm so thankful for every person who said yes when we asked them, whether it was just at the right time, whether it was at the beginning of last year. People seem to pop up in just the right way when we need them. And that's been one of the real blessings of being moderator this year. So thank you to everyone who has contributed. You can see all of the reports from all of the ministries in the annual report, and I hope you've had a chance to read them or will take time to read them in the coming weeks. They are full of great information about what went on this year. I did ask the chairs of the ministries to be a little more succinct this year, and I hope you noticed that. We asked them to put like 5 top accomplishments of their ministry. So they've undoubtedly done a lot more, but those 5 give you a good idea of what that ministry is about without going on and on endlessly and making this a 50-page booklet instead of a 20-page booklet. So please take a minute to read all of those notes, and those reports will stand as written. Same from the messages from the pastors. So then I'd like to move on to the congregational vote on the approval of the land acknowledgement. So you'll remember that earlier in the fall, we had some informational meetings about the land acknowledgement, and you'll find the land acknowledgement printed, and I forgot to write what page it's on. 11, thank you. And I would hope, okay, let me back up. So it was crafted by then a land acknowledgement task force. And I hope that someone is here from that task force and would make a motion to approve this land acknowledgement, and then we'll say a few more words about it. Is there someone here who'd like to make that motion? To read the whole thing? Yeah, it is long. It is long. You want me to read it? Oh, somebody who said yes. Okay. If you want me to read it, I will read it. Land acknowledgement statement. Orchard Ridge United Church of Christ is situated on the ancestral, sacred, and continuously inhabited Tejope, Four Lakes region. In 1832, the United States government forced the Ho-Chunk people to cede this territory and then fought to remove them from Wisconsin. We acknowledge the unjust use of land ownership by European colonial settlers, which suppressed and profited from the Ho-Chunk and others. This history informs our work and vision for a collaborative future. We honor the Ho-Chunk and their legacy of resistance and resilience, and respectfully acknowledge the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation and other indigenous nations in what is now known as the state of Wisconsin. In light of these injustices, we as a congregation commit to learning from, listening to, and building relationships with Ho-Chunk peoples, responding faithfully to their priorities with our faith by contributing money, time, and energy to the work and needs of Indigenous peoples. So if I don't have anyone from the committee, I would make a motion that we approve this land acknowledgement.
I will second.
And Jim will second it. Now, is there any discussion? Yes?
Wondering how this would be used, and whether there could be a shorter version that could be used at the beginning of events.
Yes. Julia, do you want to comment on that at all?
Could you pose the question
The question was,
I'll
how will
repeat.
this be used?
Yeah, if I could repeat myself, yeah.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there could be a shorter version that could be used in the beginning of events, say like 2 sentences long.
I would just say that's a great idea. And we've been discussing that as pastors, maybe one for a worship setting, having a longer one. And this is meant to be a fluid statement, something that is not final and done today, but is open to editing as we see fit. And I think one of the really important things is it says relationship, giving money, very specific things. And our compassion offering last month was to Indigenous justice work. And that check will be given through relationships as well. We will hand deliver it because gift giving in Indigenous culture is very important, we've learned. So love that comment, thank you. And I think Baxter, did you have one? Yeah.
Thank you. I was originally, a few months ago, I was prepared to come and speak against this motion. Not because the idea of land acknowledgement is not important. I think it is important, and it's crucial in many ways. But what I speak against was the promise that we would fulfill all the things that we do promise in that document. Because the document itself makes a distinction between what we are doing and the people in 1832 who took the land away. I do not want us to be the people of 1832, and we would become that if we make these what to me are extremely important statements, but do not act on them. And it's encouraging to see the things that have already taken place and are planned to have happen. But I hope a year from now, when we're having our annual meeting, we don't stand up and say, oh yes, we gave money, but that's about it. I think it needs to be substantially more than that, because if we don't do more than that, we are, in fact, the people of 1832. We make promises and we break them, or don't adhere to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Baxter.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
I just thought that the committee did very wonderful work and that I'm grateful for it. And I watched them craft this to be deeper and deeper into understanding the cultural relationship that we want to honor, the people we want to honor, and what it means to not be the people of old, but to be ourselves. And I saw great heart, great mind, and hard work. So it's a big thank you to the group.
Thank you.
There was another comment over, oh, okay. There's another one over here too.
Can we start with Diane?
I want to affirm the power of this statement and the process that brought it into being. I love that there is, every time we read it, we'll see some historical context. We'll get a chance to affirm the resilience of the people who were in this land, and we'll be called into that action, which I agree is essential. And so this is a big moment, and I'm grateful for the questions and the comments. I'm very grateful that we're doing this. I think it's a beautiful statement, and it's challenging for us, which it should indeed be.
Ralph?
A question of when would we be expecting to be hearing this statement? I have heard these statements and I believe strongly in them, but if they're overused, people close their ears.
That's a great point. You know, we haven't been doing it every Sunday, but on particular ones, and I think we'll keep doing that. Might be good to, yeah, I think that's up for discussion for us to decide together. And I think one of the questions here, how do we continue this work? You know, I think I hear that up with us right now, and I just wonder if there's anyone from that task force who wrote the land acknowledgement statement who would want to create a mission team around Indigenous justice. I've been kind of waiting to see if that might emerge. And if it doesn't, I think that the work of care of creation is a really natural place for the work to be done as well. So I think I trust that it will continue, and we'll continue to, you know, nudge folks and help put a little fire under our seats to figure out how to continue the work But I think, Ralph, if you've got any feedback, you can come to us about if anyone has ever any feedback, you can always come to us as pastors, by the way. We love to hear from you. And so that's a great question. How and when will we use it?
Phil?
I know this focuses on the Ho-Chunk people because this was their land, but how does it apply to the other tribal recognized by the state of Wisconsin and the federal government? There are 10 or 11 other tribes in the state of Wisconsin.
Good question.
This is a work in motion. As the husband and captive audience for Jill, this is a work in place, going forward, continuing. You've got to start somewhere. We're in Ho-Chunk land. Let's start there.
I think we're hoping to find opportunities, and the more we dig into it, the more opportunities will come out of it.
Joyce?
Yes, I'd like to address that question about why Ho-Chunk and not the other tribes. And as they said, this was the Ho-Chunk land, so that's appropriate. And I just wanted to share briefly that I was at a meeting up in Green Bay with the Oneidas, and they did a land acknowledgement of the Menominee because their land is actually in New York, and they were transported here. And it was really Menominee land that they were on in Green Bay. So it is a complicated, and it is best to, listen and learn.
I just think that the word complicated is the most important word about this whole affair, because if you ask 2 or 3 Europeans, 2 or 3 indigenous, you're going to get 7 or 8 different opinions.
Thank you. Helene?
I just want to point out we already started initiating responses to all the federally recognized tribes in the state. The Great Lakes Intertribal Council is an organization formed by all the federally recognized tribes of the state, and that's where a compassion offering went, not to Ho-Chunk. Although there's very wonderful repatriation work going on with the Ho-Chunk now. But I just think this is the right thing in the right direction.
All right, are we ready to vote on the question? All right. Oh, Kim?
Sorry, are we voting on accepting this as a work in progress?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
correct. We are voting on accepting this statement as a fluid document, as a work in progress, not a final statement. Okay, could I have a show of hands of everyone who would like to approve this fluid document? Okay. And those opposed? I haven't been asking about undecided or abstention. Is there anyone who wants to abstain? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I have a lot of appreciation for the people that joined this task force out of a morning of workshop that we did, and I hope we can make a mission team out of that and further this work. All right. What are we up to? Okay. Congregational vote for approval of Phase 1 changes to the ORUCC Constitution. So first I want to give a huge thanks to Hal Evenson and Angie Schoenig, who were the major overhaulers of this Phase 1. And Phase 1 we talked about in a Zoom meeting 2 weeks ago and last week in an in-person meeting, and I know some of you were in attendance at those. Phase 1 basically brings the language up to our gender inclusive language that we use all the time, and it also brings us up to date with how we're currently operating in our mission teams and our officers and all of that. There were some definite differences from the original revised Constitution to this revision. But that doesn't mean we're done. So as we go through 2025 and possibly beyond, we'll be doing some more revision, looking specifically at the roles of the ministries and the mission teams, and putting a little bit more specific guidelines around those, because oftentimes people have said to us they don't really understand how that system operates between the mission teams and the ministries and the leadership team. So we want to work on that a little more during the next year, so you'll be hearing more about that. Yeah, and that said, I reminded myself, we're also hoping that a small mission team will come about that would like to work on those phase 2 changes during 2025. So if you are someone who is very interested in our Constitution and would like to do that, please let myself or Dale or Nancy Wetterston, who will be our moderator-elect, or one of the pastors, please let us know about that. So I'd like to first, I will make a motion, and I don't think Hal's here today. Oh, there you are. I didn't see you today. I want to let Hal make a motion to approve these phase 1 changes and to say anything else that I might have boggled. Okay, and a second. Second, Nancy. And discussion? I got to say, I really appreciate everybody who came to these meetings and got this discussion going early on.
Ralph?
This is you're asking for a discussion. I find it difficult to discuss this document because it's impossible for me to understand what was removed.
Okay.
Usually in this kind of a situation, I would expect to see crossouts and then additions. And we know that there are certain people in the state government who are trying to push things through constitutional changes. I'm not making any accusations, but to understand what is being done, I would have loved to have seen a crossout. Otherwise, I don't understand what the differences between the gray and the darker gray and the middle gray are.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for me to even try to say I understand.
Yeah, I get that. I'm sorry you weren't able to, I don't think you were able to be at one of the meetings beforehand. Yeah, because Hal loves color, and he color-coded all of this because he tried the strike-through method, and it ended up being such a piece of gobbledygook that he couldn't even tell, what remained because there was a lot of strike-through. Do you want to, Hal? Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks, Ralph. And you're not the first person
No,
to bring
not
that
at
forward,
all.
so I appreciate that. Yeah, if I were to summarize really the changes that were made. So, as Deanna said, overall, kind of the gender language, that was fixed all the way through. There was ministers, and we call them pastors now, and so that was fixed all the way through. As far as, and also it turned out the mission statement was not current, and so we updated that. That was a little oversight. And then as far as other changes went, and this is what made it unreadable, is that Angie and I were looking at it and we realized that in the UCC, the church is really led by the congregation. And so we actually restructured the church administration section so that instead of pastors being number 1, it was the lay leadership section was moved up. And so that was a big change that made the helped make the crossout version unreadable. Another change that has to do with how we're doing things is we clarified the makeup and the role of the human resources mission team. This was something that we've had a lot of new hires lately, and Pastor Julia in particular was asking for it. Even George Decker has been asking about that. And so basically what the proposed Constitution is doing is kind of putting in words with the human resources mission team what the leadership team approved. And kind of when we brought that forth, I said, I'm only comfortable doing this until we can bring it forth to a congregational meeting. And so we've been kind of acting on that for the past year and a quarter. And so this is the chance to kind of formalize that. As I look through the other, I guess, more significant change from how things had been done is we've been working with the two most recent historians. And so the current version of the Constitution actually removes historian because that role basically was saving like every worship program. And we had shoeboxes of unlabeled documents, and it really wasn't working well. And basically everything we have now is electronic, and it is being saved. And so kind of the leadership team recommended that that historian officer role be removed. If it was left up to me, this would be something we discuss in 2025. But, kind of the leadership team did discuss this, and this was kind of how we went. And then as I take another look.
And let me just say about the historian, things that we could identify that were like scrapbooks, photo albums that were labeled, things like that, we did keep those in the cabinets in the day room. So we have kept things that were hard copies that weren't kept digitally somewhere else. But as far as going forward, we want to keep things digitally, even photos, if we can do that.
Yeah, and I think the last point that I would make, and this was actually raised at one of our info sessions, is that there are things still in here that need to be addressed, because some of the duties that are assigned to various ministries are not happening that way. So just kind of the easy example is that the Ministry of Resources is supposedly in charge of the stewardship drive every year. They're not. And so I see this as a first step. Really the goal is to make the Constitution something that people can read and rely on and use as a guide as they come into leadership positions in the church, lay leadership positions. And so this was the first easiest step. And then once you start cracking open the nut of exactly what we want the ministries to do, that's the bigger process that we're looking to do this upcoming year. So. Yeah, and again, Ralph, I apologize, and you were not alone in that. I did like the color, and what I had done was coloring. If this was changed from the original in green, I made the change in the new one in green. And some people dug that, and then it really ticked off other people, and I apologize for that. So, yeah.
Now we know. Any other questions while I have Hal captive here?
Is there presently a clean copy of the Constitution as it would be if we accept this motion?
So the question is there presently a clean constitution of what it would be if we accept this motion? Not that I can give you no. I mean, I will select all and remove all colors. And then there's like 2 comments in there that says delete this comment because it was, I had inserted some comments in the proposed one. So not yet, but I can get it to you within a day. So, yeah.
Over here.
Kathleen.
This might be a Hal question. First of all, I am a total newbie, so I apologize if I'm speaking out of line, but I was a little concerned. I'd like to clarify this, we're not going to have a historian anymore piece. Because just because we're saving things electronically doesn't mean that we don't need to have somebody or some small group that keeps track of how that's organized and that it's staying organized. And so could you clarify that?
I think I would say that we're counting on our office manager to keep these things in a historical file, which will remain, with our items on the computer. So mainly, like the bulletins and those things that come out every week can go there. Now, if there are other things, like say we have a 75th anniversary celebration at some point, because we had a 50th. And it's a big party, and there's lots of pictures, and there's speeches and all kinds of things. And someone, bless their heart, wants to put that all together in a nice photo book or a nice something that people can hold in their hands and look at. We're all for that. But we're kind of envisioning this as more of a as it happens kind of thing. If someone wants to make a photo album of a trip to Moon Beach or of the youth service trip, we're more than happy to keep that all together in the cabinet with the other things. But we're going to count more on individuals who care about preserving this to do that for us. Because it seems like a historian was not in touch with all these things that happened and didn't really have material to work with. They ended up throwing out a ton of pictures that weren't labeled with who the people were, what the events were, what was going on, and no one knew. So if you feel strongly about keeping historical artifacts, let's say, for lack of a better word, then we want people to step up and do that.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, sure. No.
Just to clarify, there's things like the pictures from a particular event or something.
Yeah.
But what about decision, documents from annual meetings
Oh, yeah.
and from discussions that people may want to refer to in 5 years
Yes.
about what did we actually say about that? Because I have been in so many of those conversations. So I imagine that there are a set of those kinds of documents that have not yet been put into electronic files?
Anything that was, well, I think what we intend is for anything that's older than, I don't know how long we have I'm not sure, I can't say for sure how long we have the electronic documents, but all the annual meeting documents and things have been electronic as well as hard copy for, who wants to guess? 12 years. Yeah, I was going to say 10, so at least 10 years. Anything older than that, how valuable is that going to be? I know it can be, but when we've talked to our historians, they're like, nobody ever asks us to look back for any of these things. I mean, we considered that. And I think if we needed to go back farther, there would be resources we could look at to look farther. There are still some things that we haven't completely gone through, right, Mary and Meg?
We have boxes.
Yeah.
Boxes, and again, I say boxes.
Boxes, plural.
Paper from the beginning.
Yeah.
I would honestly say I would be surprised
Yeah.
if anybody's ever looked at them. Meg was the historian before me. I would say in the many years that we were historians, I think I was called in once to look for something. And Meg and I have put in quite a few hours of going through stuff. And, it's nice that you say, well, if people want to put together a thing about Moon Beach, but you have to put it together. You have to have
Yes.
names, dates, events. I can't tell you how many photos we've put out or thrown out because there's nothing. And Kathleen, I hear what you're saying, but if that is something that should be revised, that's great, but it's not going to be revised with us. So you would need somebody new. Yeah, so I just, I stopped filing stuff several years ago because it's all on computers, which, has its good points and bad points. But the amount of paper that we still have downstairs and in the day room is overwhelming, I'll say.
And we also thought about, you only keep your tax returns for 7 years, right? And we've got stuff way longer than that. 50 years.
Could I just say, Kathleen, I think you raised one really important point, which is that I think that it's important to know going forward that we have a systematic way of keeping things. And it's not so much about trying to figure out who is in a 25-year-old picture. But for example, I chaired the search committee, which brought us Pastor Kate. I'm not 100% sure that the minutes of our meetings or the documents that we put together that talked about what we were looking for in our youth pastor is anywhere but on my computer. And that's a real problem. I mean, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So I think having the leadership team talk about the importance of making sure that going forward, we are clear on what the protocol is for saving these kinds of important documents, that raises a great point, and thank you for that.
Yeah, true. And we may want to, put more language around that in particular in the Constitution rather than assigning that role to someone. Because we do ask the chairs of the ministries to submit minutes of every meeting they have, and the leadership team submits minutes of every meeting. And those are stored in the files, in the computer files. So, that should be accessible as far as tracking back decisions and things like that. But it depends on the ministry chairs to write the minutes and submit them as well. So sometimes things get missed.
Okay, I have a comment.
Yes.
Some of you know that I have done genealogy work for about 60 years. And so I have seen paper, I have seen putting it in one electronic thing, then another electronic thing, and the first one is obsolete, then the third one, and the second one is obsolete. So paper is good. And even if a historian in this church is only called upon once a year or twice a year or whatever, it's still important. And so I would say have a historian waiting in the wings, maybe doing nothing, but waiting in the wings. So filing system is good. You mentioned filing system. I guess we just need to get more files or something. But
yeah, our space is at a premium.
I would recommend, because these technical things, these computer things, could be lost too, but they become obsolete, and then what?
One last comment, I promise. I feel like we're in there's two cognitive things that don't add up. So my understanding of someone who would function as a historian is that part of their work would be to determine what is important to keep and what is not, and to stay on top of, for example, what someone just said, if not everybody's getting their minutes in, going back and making sure that they get there. Making sure that, the historian could provide oversight so that we're saving what needs to be saved and getting rid of what can be gotten rid of. It's an organizational function, and to entrust that strictly to an office manager in a world where staff changes feels a little scary to me. It feels like there could be a check and balance. That's all.
I appreciate that. I just would say that our historians have not historically wanted to make those decisions. It was hard for them to decide what's really important and what's not. So that kind of is part of why things went by the wayside with the historian.
So the function needs to happen, but the role may need to change.
Possibly, yes.
I just have a comment from Barbie Jackson online. First, a comment. She says, because of the significant reorganization of the document, she believes the approach that Hal took with the color coding was clear and understandable. And she also has a question for the moderator, asking, will documents of the sort that Kathleen was mentioning be identified prior to purging? It seems that things pertaining to controversies that were resolved should be retained, and hopefully that would be a small amount of material that could possibly or could potentially be scanned and saved online.
Yes, I think that was our intention, was to work with our former historians a little bit more to see what was there and to help make decisions about what do we really need to keep out of this. Because I think they made the first purge, and then they wanted some guidance on decision making. Yeah.
It sounds like we have some renewed energy around archives and history, which I think is great because that's how we tell our story. I served a church that was 350 years old before this one, and I got to go back and look at what kind of sermons were preached during the Civil War.
Wow.
And that was powerful. And when I came here, I wanted to know how were the decisions made to make us a sanctuary church? What were the conversations around that? And luckily, that's fresh enough that we have wonderful people who have that on their computer, who I've leaned on. But I wonder about those kinds of things as well. So it seems like the role of historian as it was and the tasks that were given weren't really serving us, and you didn't have much to do. But it does sound like there's some renewed energy around archives and history and how we tell our story to the generations that are to come. Yes. Yes, yeah, the footprint of the church, how this particular body, living organism, resolves conflict. Yeah, that's very good information for us to know. So, I don't know what we want to do with that. Hal said maybe you wouldn't have slashed it if it were your choice. Yeah.
I'll take that back. I mean, what I will say is that, again, the point of this revision was to bring us up to what we're doing now. And so, like it or not, this is what we were doing now with the historian. They weren't doing anything because they weren't sure what they were supposed to be doing. And part of the reason that we started this process is to kind of kick off discussions just like this. This is the best discussion of historian I've heard in the past 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
So this whole process, right, of what kind of constitution, how are we going to come together, how are we going to do this, right? This is supposed to start these conversations. So I'm grateful for all the feedback that we've had just now on historian. This has been great. And so I go back to that, right? This kind of says, this is what we're doing now, but if you want to say living document, right?
Yeah.
But this is kind of meant to jolt, right? How many people a month ago knew we had a historian, right? And okay.
Oh, some did. Okay, a few did. Yeah.
10 years ago. No, okay.
Yeah.
And so, right, okay, I take that back. But anyway, yeah.
Do you have a question, my dear husband?
I just want to say maybe the term historian should be changed to some other term to reflect what we wanted to do, keeping track of the records. It's like historian seems to me means like, the history of the church and all of, that kind of thing. So we want to be careful with the documents and make sure we have what we need. Maybe there needs to be a different name.
Is it okay for the moderator to make a friendly amendment to the motion? I moved it so I can? Okay. So could I say that I would like to move that we remove the historian role as it currently is from the Constitution and make make an archivist type role, not necessarily called archivist, but archivist type role, something we discuss as we make further changes to the Constitution in 2025.
The second accepts that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. Do we want to discuss more, or are we ready to call the question? Okay, let's call the question. All right. On the friendly amendment. So the friendly amendment is remove the historian role as it now stands, but continue to talk about an archivist type role as we update the Constitution throughout 2025. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. And all opposed, same. Any abstentions? Okay. Great. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for that good discussion. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for keeping me on track. All right. So now we're going to vote on the... Did I already make a motion about that too? Okay. So now we're going to vote on the changes Phase 1 to the Constitution. All in favor? Aye. Raise your hand. Okay. All opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful discussion. And with that, I am going to hand over the podium to our treasurer, John Day.
Now that all the easy stuff is done. First off, just let's talk about 2024. That was last year. If you have a copy of the annual report, if you turn to page 24, it puts together pretty clearly the financial situation that the church is in right now, which is really good. There is no mortgage. We have significant amount of money in checking account, in the CD and a money market account. We have 2 investment funds done by the United Church of Christ. They're called United Church Funds, UCF. One that is designated for building maintenance, the other for really just as a fallback fund. It's called Operation Vision Investment Reserve. Those total $146,000. Those we add to if there is a surplus. And talking about historians, in 2014, several of us, Helene, for instance, put together a motion that was approved by the congregation that if ever a surplus is generated during a fiscal year, in a calendar year, it is then divided between these 2 investment accounts. That will become important this year. On the other side, the liabilities are just the exact opposites of that, but at the bottom there's a little thing called fund balance, and that is actually money that is not designated for anything. In other words, it's just sitting around, you know, it's like money you got in your pocket. It's extra money. It's not pledges that had come in the year before. It's not money that we owe to the government. It's money that is literally surplus sitting around. It's a wonderful thing to have. If you flip to the next page, just to show you what happened last year, we got a little bit less than what we expected in pledge income, but we got a lot more money than expected in unpledged giving. And everybody that's done that, I appreciate, because that really made a difference. The total income for the church last year was $18,000 more than what we expected. Okay? That, you know, can you imagine? Yeah, it is amazing. It's, yes. And it has nothing to do with me, it has to do with you all. On the other side, we spent a little bit less than what we expected, which means that we have a surplus this year of over $16,000. And that money then will be split between these 2 investment accounts. We'll write them a check next week, put that money in the investment accounts, and hopefully it will continue to grow as these accounts have grown. That's last year in a nutshell. And that's what I'm supposed to talk about first. And I think we need a motion to accept the reports in general. And that means you get to go.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's report?
And all of the reports.
And all of the treasurer's reports. Is that how I say it?
All of the reports in the annual meeting.
Oh, all of the reports in the annual meeting. Okay, yeah, I didn't do that from the beginning. I should have. Steve so moves. Second, great, Phil. Okay, so can I have a show of hands that we approve the reports in the annual report? Oh yes, we need discussion, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I was doing so good. Okay, Dave.
The money, the special things that we have every month. Like
Yes.
This month it's
The compassion offerings.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Is that under unpledged giving or is that separately somehow?
No, that's separate, correct? Yeah.
You can see that total if you go to the special funds page.
Yeah, I saw that. I just wondered,
That's not included in any of this on page 25.
No, unpledged giving is nothing to do with the compassion offering. No, that is money that comes in just as an offering.
Okay.
People will say for the general fund type of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Deanna?
Yes,
Who made the second?
Phil Winkle. Any other discussion? Okay, so can I have a show of hands on the approval of all the reports in the annual report? Okay, opposed? Abstentions? Okay, now we go, right? Yep. Okay.
So the other thing has to do with not next year anymore, this year, 2025. And again, if you'd look on page 25, this is a good summary of what we project, and that's what this is. You know how budgets work. You're taking a guess at various things. As far as income is concerned, the pledge drive did not do as well as we'd hope. Pledges only came in a little bit over 1% more than last year. Disappointing because many of you increased your personal pledge by 6%, which is what we asked. Obviously, what that means is that we lost some pledges, and some people kept their pledges the same. So overall, not as good as we hoped. There are also people who pledged in 2024 who haven't paid that pledge, and I'm hoping that we'll get about half of that, because that was over $20,000. I'm hoping we'll get about half of that coming in this year, which is what is called prior year pledge. We're hoping still to keep unpledged giving high, not as high as last year. That was pretty crazy. So our total estimated income for next year is going up about 4.5%. In terms of spending, the greatest increase in spending for 2025 has to do with staff salaries. And the Human Relations Committee, the group that's been looking at this, proposed that we increase basically everybody's salary by 4%, with the exception of our 2 associate pastors whose salaries have sort of fallen back a little bit behind the recommended level for this area. So Kate's salary, we proposed increase by 5%, and Ken, who's been here the longest and as a result fallen back behind the furthest, about 13.5%. Now, when you look at the salaries, there's one weird thing, and that has to do with our the person, Julie Mazer, who now has a new title called Director of Children's Art and Education. Her salary used to be split into 2 bits. It has been combined into one line, which looks like it went up dramatically. It has not. Her salary went up 4% in each of those 2 categories, but when you combine them together, it looks bigger. She is getting the 4% like everyone else. Other than that, there really are very small changes in the other areas, administration, resources. We have to increase dramatically our property insurance because, yeah, everybody's property insurance has gone up. If you've had a bill from that lately, you know 20% is not unusual. And pretty much that's it. Unfortunately, what that means, because our income isn't going up as fast as we wanted and our spending it's proposed that next year we will have a deficit of about $10,000. Now, that sounds horrible, but if you go back to what I said right from the beginning, we have an unencumbered fund balance of over $46,000. So we can handle it. It's not a big deal. Also, last year the proposed budget actually had a deficit of around $15,000. And we ended up with a surplus of $16,000. So things can happen. Who knows what's going to happen this year? So I think anyway that it's a prudent budget. We're going to do everything we can not to go into a deficit, but if we do, it's workable. And, you know, if anybody wants to increase their pledge, feel free to do so. Questions? I think we will wait for mics.
Yeah, just a quick question on page 23. You say that the financial software is cumbersome. Are you going to replace that? Can you replace that? Just questions.
No, it's a good question. We looked into that several years ago. There are advantages to using something that is cumbersome because it actually works. And as part of that, everyone knows we've gone through several staff changes this last year. One of them is that our office manager, Julie Wambacher, left. We hired a new office manager, George Decker. He was not real comfortable using the church software, so we've ended up hiring an accountant that is very comfortable with it. He is doing that kind of a stuff for a relatively small amount, $500 a month. And George actually took a salary cut then to help balance that out. So right now we're doing pretty well with the software, and it is cumbersome. I actually tried to use it for a period of time when we were between office managers, and I'm glad I don't have to do that for a living.
What is our software?
It's called Power Church. Ken?
I think you've answered this question. The financial administrator went from 1,000 to 6,000. I assume we only had him for 2 months last year?
That is exactly right, yes. Excuse me. Well, what we need is a motion to accept the budget for 2025.
So moved.
Who? And a second? Okay. You want me to just go ahead and do it? All right. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Abstain? Is there any questions or comments from the people that are online? Okay, they've all...
I have a comment. John Day is retiring as treasurer, and he has been doing this for a god-awful long period of time.
Just 11 years. Come on, man.
I think we need to give him a more...
That's for you as well. You don't want a gift basket. So we got a Grateful Dead t-shirt.
Yes, you may not know this about John. He told me one time that whenever he searches on a date in his Google search, it comes up with what the Grateful Dead concert was on that given date. And he suggested that's just amazing, you know, that Google loves the Grateful Dead. And I said, I think that may tell us a little bit more about you, John. So we did. This is John Day now, officially. Yep. So we just want to celebrate that. We did get the T-shirt and we got the music. We're using this under fair use, just in case anybody wants to know, because it's very difficult to figure out how to license Grateful Dead music. They seem to want to give it away. So that's all good. But thank you, John. Really appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me already, I'm Dale Rebhorn, and last year I was the moderator-elect and part of the leadership team. And as part of that, I also led the nominations process leading up to today's meeting. So here we are with that. The nominations committee met several times during the past few months, and I am very pleased to say that we have been able to fill our open positions this year with several outstanding candidates for your consideration. I will say this would not have happened without the explicit and considerable help of the nominations team, and would like to recognize and thank them for their work. John Lemke is online, I know, Susan Dovell, Susan Wagner, Sally Allen, and our pastoral coach, that's what I'm calling you, Ken, our pastoral coach, Ken Pennings. You'll find the full list of nominations in the annual report. There's a long list of all the different things that have to be filled, but I do want to call out just a few of the nominees who are heading up the ministries and functional teams. Nancy Wetterston has agreed to be our moderator-elect for next year, so thank you for that. Since we're having John Day Day, that does mean we need to have a new treasurer. And Krista Rickman volunteered and stepped forward. We're very happy to have her. She's had a lot of experience doing this job in, is it Topeka, Kansas? Did I get that right?
No, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Lincoln, Nebraska, okay. Lincoln, Nebraska. She's had considerable experience doing this at a previous church, so we're really happy to have her on board. In addition, we think that it's probably prudent to have more than one person looking at some of these treasury things, because it is kind of it's a big job and a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot going on, and you can see there's a couple, more than a few dollars there. So Peter Hoff has agreed to be our new associate treasurer, which is a new position, but thank you, Peter. We have a couple new committee chair, we have a couple new ministry chairs. I got to use the right words. Dan Miller and Julie Horst. Is Julie here? There she is. Julie Horst have agreed to be the new co-chair for Christian Witness and Service. And Susan Sorek is going to be the chair for Adult Faith Formation. New to the leadership team as at-large members this year, Barbie Jackson, who's online, I know, and Dave Myers are going to be on the leadership team. There are several new members of the different ministries, but in the interest of time, I'll refer you to the report, which gives all the details on that. I will note that given all the changes, we are still looking for a few new financial secretaries. So the work of the nominations committee continues. The financial secretaries are the ones that help us do the accounting for the money and the offering and a few other duties like that. So we're still looking for that, as well as a couple of people still on various ministries, but we have a pretty full slate, and we're really pleased with where we're at right now. Please, however, reach out to us if you would like to volunteer for any of these positions, because it does not end now. It continues to go on for the foreseeable future. Given all of that, I'll open it up for questions. In that case, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the full slate of nominees as presented. Oh, Mary, did you have a question first?
I was just going to ask you if you were going to mention this
Oh,
beautiful.
you know I will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dan.
It's coming.
Okay, thank you.
Julie?
Yeah, I think I can project one up. This is a little awkward to ask this question, but I noticed that Dan and my terms go through January 2028, and I think our service on CWS is actually complete next January, and we're fulfilling Luann's term. Dan, is that your understanding as well?
My current understanding, yes, but.
So.
Okay, so I have to admit, part of the record keeping, we've already discussed record keeping, right, is trying to keep track of all these little dates. So Julie, we will make sure to figure that out, and whatever is the right answer, that is your term. Yeah. How about that? That's the closest I can get right now, because honestly, in some cases, it's just hard to pin some of this stuff down. Yep, so, but I appreciate your comments on that. Thank you. In that case, then, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the slate of nominees. Thank you, Hal.
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Is that Sue?
Thank you.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, then we're good for the year. I guess that means, Deanna, wow, we got to do the turnover. How about that? How about that? Thank you. I'll take the baton. Steve?
And we do want to honor Deanna.
Oh,
right, Steve, do you want to say something first?
I did.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
I think you skipped a part of the agenda called open time for questions.
Oh, yeah.
I have some.
Okay.
My questions concern the memorial funds, the memorial committee. And according to the Constitution, that would fall under resources. And I'm wondering several questions regarding that. You'll notice that on page 30 of the Treasurer's report, memorial funds spent for $4,870 last year. I wonder if it's appropriate for us to know what those memorial funds were used for.
I'd have to go back to the records. I honestly don't remember. No, I don't know.
Okay.
Just put it down for the people that aren't here. We need to go back to the records to check on that, Steve. We just don't have that detail here.
If it's appropriate, I would like to know.
Yep.
And I wonder, in terms of approving the expenditures of memorial funds, who exactly is approving memorial fund expenditures?
I'm going to look to Hal, but I believe the Constitution lets the leadership team do that.
I didn't see that in the Constitution, but if that's the working idea, I guess I can accept that.
Yeah, it's not really directly assigned in the Constitution, and so in recent years, it's been the leadership team that's been making that call. Yeah.
And I think that's something we wanted to talk about during this next iteration.
Good.
Of phase 2, because we haven't had a good team to oversee.
Yeah, there used to be a memorial committee. Phil wants to say something. Phil, here you go.
Well, I know that the Garth Fund, for example, is committed to people, families who want to use the Garth. So that, I know that's not a fund that can be used for anything else. And my wife happens to be in the Garth, so I'm concerned that that is understood. And I believe Ken now is taken over. No, Winton used to keep track of the donations that were made to fund being able to be placed in the Garth. And so I'm not sure who's doing that job.
So the question, I'm not technically doing it, but we've got all of our records are in order. On George Decker, it keeps meticulous records concerning who is paid money for the Garth and who is in the Garth currently. Those things are all in order.
I should have said on the mic before, what I said to Steve was that we have talked about the memorial, like a mission team, because we haven't really had that in the past few years. And I think maybe because it got put under resources and resources doesn't really do that, that's part of the reason why. So in our phase 2 work through the Constitution, I'm sure memorial giving mission team will come up in that, and we definitely planned on that happening.
One final question. So if, hypothetically, a family donates a memorial fund for a specific, their desire, let us say, just hypothetically, it might be for scholarships for the youth service trip.
Sure.
How would a donor know that that was actually activated?
We have a list of all of the specific designated funds already that we keep track of and we review. Which page is it on, John?
30.
On page 30. So they're actually listed in the annual report. There's about 25 or so on there of various amounts. And I know the leadership team has reviewed them several times this year when specific things come up. There's a couple actions taken on like the Jane Ilgen Fund. They had to make some changes, and we had a team that worked on making the changes there, et cetera. So at various times, the leadership team has been working on specific funds. So if they're so designated, then we manage it that way.
And
The undesignated funds that John referred to are truly undesignated. It doesn't include all those funds that are specifically
So
designated.
the answer to my question then is that the donor would know that the funds they have donated have been actually spent for that purpose? Yes?
Correct. Yeah, John's got some more information. We'll get him the microphone.
Most funds donated are not designated, memorial funds specifically. We had a specific memorial fund for landscaping. That has been used only for landscaping. The Jane Elgin Fund has had a very specific designation for reading. That's exactly what that's been used for. But the vast majority of the funds have not been designated for a purpose, and that's good because that gives the church a chance to decide what to do with it. But anything that's donated to anything specific, we keep track of that really well.
Okay. Anything else, Steve? You said, okay? Nope, that's good. If appropriate then, I'd like to continue on because the next piece on the agenda is a short piece on plans for 2025. We are here. It's already February, so how about that? But before I start specific on the plans for that, I think it's appropriate. I just want to take you a little bit of a journey with a brief introduction to me, since this is kind of my first chance to stand up here. And it's actually a little intimidating for me to stand up here in the role of the moderator because I'm bracketed on both sides by our previous moderator and our future moderator who have been with the church much, much longer than I have. And I've actually only been attending here about 3 years. They know everybody here, which is a terrific asset to me. And it really helps as we're going through the nominations process and some of the other work of our team. But since I'm relatively new, my wife Leslie and I have been attending here about 3 years. I thought I'd just give you a little brief introduction. So I'll start out, there's a picture. My dear wife Leslie, many of you know her from the various activities that she does here at church as well. In the middle, that's my daughter Abby and her family. They live up in Wanakee. And on the right is my son Andrew and his family, and they live down in Fitchburg. The two families are really the reason we came up here to Madison a few years ago. We were living in Indianapolis, but we knew at some point there might be grandkids who hadn't arrived yet, but we didn't want to delay. So we moved up here a while back, and we've made it. We get to see them 3 times a week, maybe. And so if I'm not working on church stuff, I'm probably doing something with the grandkids. The next chart is a little bit of background on me, just for information. So we've hopped around to a lot of different churches. I actually started at Evangelical United Brethren. Any EUB people? Wow, okay. That's a long time ago anyway. You may have heard of them. But they then became part of the United Methodist Church, which is where I grew up. Leslie and I have been in Methodists, we've been Presbyterians, we lived in Japan for a while. There are 3 churches. There's a Mormon church, a Catholic church, and everybody else. So we went to everybody else. We went to an Anglican church in the Czech Republic. We just missed the Sunday when Prince Charles was there. And now we're at the United Church of Christ. So I hope that my diverse background helps a little bit in bringing some different kinds of experiences from other churches. On a professional side, just a little bit, kind of what I've done. Both Leslie and I were teachers. We taught middle school, high school, elementary. We've taught a lot of different things. And then I worked 30 years for IBM as a technical specialist and executive. I retired for the first time there, and then I went to Franklin College in Franklin, Indiana, and taught leadership. I used that leadership teaching then, that's what got us up here to Madison, where I worked at American Family and taught leadership up there. And now I have retired again, but in the summers I teach computer science and art, believe it or not, to preschool students at UW in the summers. So that keeps... Pre-college, not preschool. Oh, did I say preschool? Yeah. Stick to the script, Dale. Pre-college students. It's actually, though, we do have 3rd graders and up, so I'm teaching to them. We've moved so many times. IBM stands for, we've learned, I've been moved. So we have done a lot of different things, but what that does is it brings us to here at this time so that we can be part of this congregation. We very much plan to stay much longer in this location than we have in some of our previous locations. So that's what I kind of bring professionally and personally from a church background to this role in a church. For the past year then, I've been moderator-elect, and we've been looking into communications. That was one of the tasks that I did. And I've talked to a lot of people individually, and I've gotten lots and lots of feedback. And I will definitely say there is a desire to continue to build on what we do, but people want to know more about how the church operates and what our programs are doing. So that's fair and well-deserved. To that end, Mary, as you mentioned, there's now a brochure. I'm going to give credit here to Dan Miller, who linked us up with a graphics person, helped us put together something that I think is kind of sharp, and it goes through actually the whole of the church organization. There is even a large print version if you would like that, but this one booklet then kind of gives you an overview of the ministries and the mission teams and how the church is organized. We've got one chart, if we can bring that up, which though is designed, this kind of gives you a picture of how the church is kind of organized. On the left-hand side, we've got, of course, the pastors and the staff. We've got the pieces, the functional areas that the leadership team is really thinking about, which is human resources and finance, but also includes things like how do we archive our materials? Right now we store them in the cloud. They're stored at Microsoft OneDrive. That's how we're storing them, but we worry about some of those types of things. And then, of course, the congregation is part of this as well, both congregation members and also friends of the congregation. This is all what we've been discussing when we look at the budget, when we look at the Constitution and the Constitution changes. This is just trying to present it in visual form. On the right-hand side are those 5 ministries that are in the Constitution. That was what we didn't elect to take on when we were revising the Constitution this year, but we put them up here. Sometimes, I know I've had the bad habit, we kind of refer to them by initials. So I've put them up there rather than saying Congo life. It is literally congregational life. And you can see all 5 of those. Each one of those then has a page in the brochure that gives you more detail about the mission teams that are currently working with each one of the 5 ministries. So that's a little bit about how our church is organized. There is an ebb and flow, I would say, to some of this at times. So sometimes, Steve, as you mentioned, memorials, right? We don't have a formal memorial fund team right now. But there may become a point where we do need to take a look at that, and then we bring a team together, more of an ad hoc team and not necessarily a big formal team or part of the Constitution to deal with those types of things. So that's how the church is organized in visual form. This is going to be updated. I already know there's at least one thing that didn't get exactly properly done within here, but we're going to keep the updated down here, and we'll print out more copies as things change. So that's an attempt to try to give you a little bit better picture of how this thing works, and maybe it's a little easier to have an infographic rather than trying to read all the pages of the Constitution, which is a bit of work for sure. I do also have one idea about how to ask questions. So on the next chart, there's actually a really easy way that I'm going to encourage anybody to use. If you'd like to get in touch with us, we have this magic email address, moderators@orucc.org. When you send us a note, it gets to all 3 of us. So Deanna, I, Nancy, we'll all get it at the same time. Anything you bring to us, we'll try to answer, or we'll try to figure out a way to handle it, or we'll bring it to the attention of the leadership team, who can then also pass it on to a ministry. So it really is all-encompassing, and it can be anything that you want. And I encourage you to use this method because there's a couple reasons. For one, it's helpful for us to have it written down or get it in electronic format so that we don't forget. I get a lot of comments I know Deanna gets a lot of comments. People share something, and it's like, but we didn't quite get that on the agenda. So we need to capture this somehow, and this will help us capture it electronically. And it just avoids things getting lost, or that might be forgotten, because it's tough. It just puts us all on the copy list automatically, and then we all can figure out how we deal with it. So that brings us to plans for 2025. I will say, obviously, I know in our household, as well as in many of yours, 2025 has started out with a lot of angst and fear. I'll put that out there. It has not been fun, and I know I've talked to the pastors, we've had different conversations with different groups, and there's a lot going on, particularly in our nation, that we're going to have to deal with. We are already thinking about plans for that. In February, I know we're going to talk about immigration, some of the planning for that. March, I know I've already got it on the agenda. We've got to figure out some of the things with how do we keep track of records and how do we make sure we've got the information from all the committees. But a lot of the work of the church is actually managed by those mission teams. And as you page through that brochure, you can see how many mission teams there are. There are a lot, right? And it was tough enough just to try to get the leadership point of view, right? Rather than try to figure out who's on all the different mission teams. Because again, they do ebb and flow. Different people get involved. As far as I can tell, we've captured as best as we can the current state. But some of the teams like Moses has come up fairly recently. There's a brochure on the back table that just is giving some background on that, for example. So we're here. And my goal, I know, and I think the leadership goal, we're here to fulfill the goals of the congregation. We're not trying to drive our agenda, right? So it's not like there's some things I am here that I want to change, right? What I'm trying to do in my leadership role is to help to work to fulfill the goals of the congregation and the people and the teams here at Orchard Ridge. So that's what the plan is for this year. I don't know what's going to happen. We're anticipating some interesting times. Am I right? Already been some interesting times, and you heard about it from the pulpit this morning, right? We do have to make sure that we address the needs of the staff, and the leadership team is clearly involved in that, working through the HR team. And we do have to manage the financial operations of the church, right? That's why you've heard more about those particular areas today than any of our justice ministries, for example, because that's what the leadership team and the annual meeting and the Constitution are really revolving around. But the day-to-day operations and the things that really make the church a great place to be, we have people specifically on teams that are working on those things, and that's what we're here to support. So I have two hopes for 2025. Two things that are at the top of my mind. Number one, how do we grow our church? Now, church growth is a funny thing, right? Because that can be different things depending. But I really look at this, I'm reminded of the book of James, right? Because the book of James talks about faith and works in the New Testament, right? And it's faith that we have to grow. We're working to grow our faith. That's why we come to church, right? But we also have work that we're looking to grow. And so that seems like a dichotomy, like those are two different things, but to me, those are the two things, right? I'm thinking on a practical level, how do we grow our membership? How do we grow the work that we do? We do have to worry about our membership and our finances, but we also have to work on growing our relationships and faith. And so that's top of my mind. And I'm really excited about stuff that we have right now. We have a great story when we talk about church growth, right? We have a commitment to justice ministries. It's right in our motto, and we heard about it this morning, and we have all kinds of teams that are working on this, right? We have an open and affirming congregation that supports all people, right? Which is very, very important to both specific people here and to all of us in general. That's a commitment that we have. We have a music ministry that goes from youth all the way through adults, from Julie Mazur's work with the youth to Rob's work with True Function to the choir, the Bell Choir, and other adult programs, right? So this to me is all very exciting, and I want to figure out how do we keep spreading this word. we've been working with a new kind of ad hoc team on communications to get more things out there to people, to spread the word more widely. And these days, a lot of times that means social media. So we're going to look at that as one of our themes this year. So the second theme I have then to go along with growth is communication and sharing, right? We got to get the word out. I'm constantly asked by people, what's going on? What's that mission? What are we doing about this? I know, Deanna, you've gotten a lot of it. Nancy, welcome to the team. We're going to have a lot of that. And we haven't figured out communications perfectly. Again, everybody has a point of view on this, and I respect that, and there's no perfect solution. So our approach is really to continue to run experiments. This, for example, is an experiment, right? If this is a good idea, we'll keep doing this. If people say, why'd you spend the money on that? Then maybe we won't. I actually think it's pretty cool because now I can kind of figure things out when I'm trying to figure out what's going on at church. And we'll be doing more experiments like that. And maybe that helps people understand how the church operates a little better. We're also looking to see what tools we use, and that includes social media, as I mentioned. So if you notice, some of you may have picked it up already, but out here on the table right there out that door and on the table outside that door, there are half-page little surveys. It's really quick. It'll only take you maybe 3 minutes. Yeah, thanks. Sarah's holding it up there. And we've got golf pencils now. It turns out that's actually an item that George can order. It's a golf pencil, but you don't have to use it for golf. You can use it for the survey. If you fill out that survey for us, this is a better cross-section of people than just my anecdotal talking to one person at a time. So if you can help me out by filling that out, and before you go, you can just leave it back there and we'll collect them and tally them. I'm not sure if we have 3 Instagram users or 200 Instagram users in our congregation. I just don't know. We may choose to use Instagram as more of a evangelization or bringing people in. So it may be more community oriented. And maybe we should have our website be more oriented towards the needs of the congregation. Or maybe we should flip that backwards. I don't know. But we're trying to collect a little bit more data just to get a sense of where things are at. So if you can help me out with that survey, before you go, I'd be most appreciative. It is anonymous. You don't have to write your name on it. I will also acknowledge I did put Twitter on because I guess I'm old-fashioned and I don't like to call it X. If you use either one of those, you know what it's all about. Use that information as you would like. So those 2 things, church growth, our faith and our work, and communications are kind of the themes that I'm starting with over the year. I think what's going to happen, we have topics already on the leadership team agenda where we're going to be digging deeper into immigration justice. I know that's on the topic already for the meeting that's next week. Gosh, I better get the agenda out on that, hadn't I? So we're going to be dealing with things that come up this year. That's the nature of the business. How much, Deanna, did you think that you might be coming up with? At the beginning of the year, 50%? Probably not even, right? So that's really the goal, right? Is we hope to have a flexible structure that's here and it's ready to take on whatever we need to take on for 2025. I am sure there'll be more specific things, and I sincerely hope that this year becomes a little less filled with fear and a little more filled with joy. So that's, I guess, my prayer. So that's the end of the report for 2025. We're at the end of the meeting. Julia, I think you're going to have something to say, so that would be good.
Oh, it's so nice to have your energy, Dale.
Oh, well, thank you.
This is wonderful. Yes. And we want to, Hal has just gone off to the land of the past moderators over here with Barbara. So we're so grateful for you. And Deanna, you are also going off to the land of the past, not that land yet, but the formal past moderator. And I love working with our moderator team. Nancy, I'm so excited to welcome you. And Deanna, we just want to thank you so much. You have been a force of good, of love, of peace among us. You helped us live into that mantra of all will be well. And we are so grateful for the way you've led with kindness, with humility. And so we have this wonderful gift basket up here for you. So deep gratitude for you. And Dale, I think you've got a beautiful closing prayer that you can, yeah, so come on up. That's all I've got. I just want to show gratitude to Deanna and welcome you.
Yeah, both Deanna and Hal have taught me so much. So being relatively new and just kind of plunging in, going, I'm sure it'll be fine. And it has been. So thank you both, really, very much. I will say, if there any other business that needs to be brought forward to the annual meeting before we close? Just for the sake of completeness? Okay. Jim, do we need a motion to close? I think we do.
After the prayer.
We'll do the prayer as part of the meeting. How about that? So if you join me for my very short closing prayer. Creator, thank you that in your presence there is fullness of joy. Please fill us with strength for the year to come. Bless this church and all of the people that are part of it. Through your grace, we will work to serve you and be witnesses here on earth for your divine message. Amen. Amen. Motion to adjourn the meeting from Nancy. Is there a second? Second. I heard from John first. So, all those in favor, please raise your hand. I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for attending and sticking through for a good long discussion. Thank you.